reborn into this life, once more. I came face to face with my cold, impeccably dressed biological brother again. He rubbed his temples slowly, then tossed a black bank card onto the table with a cold, detached tone. 5 million is compensation, he said indifferently. There is a high-rise penthouse arranged for you in the downtown district. Move out of this mansion today. Every time Lisa sees you, she falls into severe distress and ends up hospitalized in the emergency room. Lisa, the fake heiress, who had stolen my identity and family affection many years ago. He hesitated for a brief moment, his expression tight and conflicted. I will meet any reasonable request you put forward. Just do not step foot in this family home ever again. In my past life, I had foolishly refused this sum of hush money, terrified that cutting ties with cash would sever the last fragile blood bond between us. Desperate to win his cold affection, I worked endless night shifts just to save up for his birthday gift, only to be struck and killed by a drunk driver on my way home. When Preston received news of my sudden death, he felt no sorrow or grief. He only breathed a sigh of cold relief. That troublesome nuisance is finally gone for good. The family bond one had clung to and yearned for with all my heart had never been anything more than a heavy, annoying burden in his eyes. This time around, I shed all tears and childish longing. I reached out calmly and took the black card into my hand. Thank you. One additional condition. Increase the compensation to 10 million, and we will cut off all ties completely, with no further connection for the rest of our lives. What did you just say? Preston stared at me in utter shock, pure disbelief spreading across his sharp features. I met his stunned gaze steadily, my voice calm and unwavering. Give me an additional 10 million, and I will sign a formal document to renounce all my rights and ties to this family. You will never need to see my face or be troubled by my existence again. In this way, your precious Lisa will no longer need repeated hospital visits because of my presence. 10 million to guarantee her peaceful, perfect life. That is an extremely fair deal, is it not? Preston fell into dead silence. The sheer boldness and indifference of my request seemed to short-circuit his rational mind. For several long seconds. A fair deal, he sneered coldly. At last, are you truly this desperate for money? Would you sell off your own blood and kin for a mere 10 million? Would you abandon our innate family bond just for a bank check? I looked straight into his eyes and nodded without hesitation. Yes, I was precisely that, desperate for solid, tangible wealth in my previous life, let alone 10 million, even to earn a meager $1,000. A low-educated high school graduate, like me, had to toil away, day and night on a factory assembly line for 10 straight days, surviving on little food and almost no rest. In this new life, empty family bonds and shallow blood ties meant nothing to me. Hard cash was the only reliable armor that could protect my future. Given a second chance at life, I only wish to live freely and independently following my own will. I only want the additional $10 million. Preston's chest rose and fell sharply, seething with suppressed rage. He must have felt deep disgust toward me in that moment. It was humiliating for a wealthy, noble man like him to share the same blood as someone he viewed as a greedy, money-obsessed opportunist. Fine, 15 million in total. He spat out harshly. Sign this voluntary family severance agreement, and the full funds will be transferred to your personal account immediately. I did not hesitate for a single second. I picked up the heavy fountain pen on the table and signed my name, Sloan, neatly on the dotted line. Beneath Preston's complicated, burning gaze of anger and confusion, I gripped the black card holding $15 million and walked straight out of the luxurious family mansion's front door. Miss Sloan, the young master has instructed me to drive you to your new residence. The family chauffeur hurried over and pulled open the door of the luxury Bentley. I glanced back over my shoulder. On the second floor, Preston's tall silhouette was reflected clearly in the huge floor-to-ceiling glass window. In my past life, he had started with the same shallow show of consideration and courtesy. It were those tiny fleeting moments of false warmth that tricked me into believing he held a sliver of care for me. It was why I had burned myself out repeatedly, scrambling to please him at all costs. Yet the bitter truth was it had only ever been basic polite etiquette, nothing more than the condescending pity of a wealthy elite. The only sister he cherished and kept close in his heart had always been Lisa, and only Lisa. I snapped back to the present reality and offered the driver a gentle, polite smile. No, thank you. I will make my own arrangements. I pulled out my mobile phone and ordered a ride, hailing car on the spot. Now that I had formally cut off all ties with this family, I had no intention of riding in their luxury vehicles or accepting any more of their false charity. 3 days later, inside an upscale downtown cafe, Miss Sloan, all legal paperwork has been fully finalized. You are now an official major shareholder of Apex Innovations. The moment I walked out of that cold mansion with $15 million in hand, I had a clear, precise plan for every sum of that capital. Now that money had successfully converted into a legally binding equity contract, I held 15% of the total shares in Apex Innovations. Victor, the company's chief executive officer, was visibly brimming with excitement as he reached out to shake my hand firmly. Thank you deeply for trusting our team and our project. I promise, every cent of your investment will be fully utilized to expand and upgrade our core technology. You will never regret this decision. I nodded slowly and calmly. I knew with absolute certainty that I would never come to regret it. Apex Innovations was destined to grow into the world's largest autonomous drone manufacturing empire in the near future, securing a permanent top ranking on the global Fortune 500 list. This $15 million initial investment would multiply 1,000 times in value within just a few short years. How about I treat you to a formal dinner later this week? I would like to walk you through our complete operational roadmap and future development plans in detail. Victor offered with sincere goodwill. I shook my head gently in refusal. I appreciate your kindness, Victor, but I will have to decline the dinner invitation. When it comes to company operations and development, I place my full trust in your professional judgment. I prefer to leave specialized work to specialized talents. I do not merely invest in emerging technology. I invest in capable, reliable people. I paused briefly, adjusting the strap of my shoulder bag. Besides, I have a professional course to attend soon. Victor blinked, an obvious surprise and confusion. A course? Yes. I have enrolled in an advanced executive finance training bootcamp to systematically learn core knowledge, such as project valuation and return on investment analysis. I curved my lips into a self-deprecating smile. My foundational financial knowledge is rather weak and incomplete. I need to build a solid professional foundation from scratch. He studied me quietly for several seconds, and the respect in his eyes deepened noticeably. Very well. You are welcome to visit and inspect the company's operations at any time you wish. After leaving the cafe, I headed straight for the high-end business skyscraper, where my finance course was held. The training classroom was located on the 12th floor. When I pushed open the glass lecture hall doors, most of the seats were already occupied. I scanned a layered seating in search of an empty spot. Yet my peripheral vision caught a familiar figure, sitting in the front row by the window. It was Lisa. She was surrounded by a small group of close female friends, chatting and laughing softly as the undisputed center of attention. Just as it had been in my past life, no matter where she went, she always drew everyone's favor and focus effortlessly. I did not spare her a single extra glance and walked directly toward the very last row of seats in the back. But the second I passed the aisle beside her seat, she lifted her head. Our eyes collided directly. She froze for a split second before a sickly sweet, mocking smile tugged at her lips. She spoke in a tone loud enough for her entire friend group to hear clearly. Sloan, what in the world are you doing here? The tuition for this advanced training cohort is far from cheap. Have you already squandered all the compensation money Preston gave you? I ignored her provocation completely and kept walking. She frowned unhappily and a malicious, knowing glint flashed in her eyes. I suppose poverty truly limits one's vision. You get a small sum of money in your hands, and you instantly forget your proper place in life. Do not tell me you actually believe attending a few simple training seminars will magically turn you into a top-tier financial expert. She let out a soft, disdainful laugh, not bothering to hide the thick sarcasm in her tone. At the end of the day, theoretical knowledge is all meaningless, empty talk. Without powerful family backing or substantial personal capital, memorizing textbooks and professional materials is nothing more than a waste of precious time. Unlike myself, Preston has already arranged a professional investment portfolio for me to manage real market projects. I am only attending this course to obtain a completion certificate for my resume. One of her fawning friends immediately chimed in to cater to her words. Lisa, your brother spoils you endlessly and gives you the best of everything. Naturally, he does. Lisa's eyes curved into smudged crescent shapes, yet her gaze swept coldly over me, sharp and cutting. I will tell you all the truth. Book knowledge cannot compete with real-world resources and influence. Just the other day, a top-tier university PhD scholar came begging to my brother for investment funding. His name was Sheldon, if I recall correctly. He groveled like a stray animal just for a mere $5 million of funding. My brother treated him with obvious disdain. That scholar endured every cold word and insult with a forced smile. What good is a prestigious, high-level degree if you still have to beg humbly for financial support? Sheldon, I repeated silently in my mind, letting the syllables roll over my thoughts. I didn't stop walking. I didn't flush with anger, nor did I stop to engage in a petty verbal spar with a girl whose entire existence was defined by the money of others. Instead, I simply paused by the back row, pulled out my notebook, and took a seat. Lisa's triumphant smile faltered. My sheer lack of reaction was like a punch landing on cotton. For someone who fed on drama and superiority, being treated like background noise was the ultimate insult. Did you hear me? Lisa snapped, her voice rising half an octave, shedding her faux elegant persona. Or did the reality of your pathetic life finally strike you mute? I uncapped my pen, adjusting my notebook. Without looking up, I replied, my voice carrying no heat, only absolute indifference. I heard you, Lisa. You are auditing a course for a piece of paper. Your brother enjoys humiliating desperate academics, and theoretical knowledge is useless to you. Was there a profound point I missed, or were you just updating me on your family's moral decay? Someone in the row ahead of me stifled a laugh. Lisa's face flushed a violent shade of red. She opened her mouth to retort, but the heavy oak doors of the lecture hall swung open, and the professor strode in. Forced to sit, Lisa glared at the back of my head for the rest of the hour, but I had already discarded her from my mind. My focus was entirely on the name she had so arrogantly dropped, Sheldon. In my past life, I remembered a massive financial earthquake that had shaken the tech sector just 2 years before my death. A revolutionary breakthrough in solid-state microbatteries had hit the market, fundamentally changing the landscape of consumer electronics, EVs, and automated robotics. The patent holder had become a billionaire overnight. The inventor's name had been Dr. Sheldon Vance. Preston, in his infinite arrogance, had a man holding the key to the next decade of technological advancement begging at his feet, and he had turned him away just to stroke his own ego. The moment the lecture ended, I packed my bag and walked out, ignoring Lisa's furious attempts to block my path. I pulled out my phone and dialed Victor. Miss Sloan. Victor answered promptly, the background noise of a bustling R&D floor filtering through the speaker. To what do I owe the pleasure? Victor, I need a favor, I said, stepping into the quiet corridor. Look into the local tech incubators and university doctoral programs. I am looking for a researcher named Sheldon. He recently pitched a project requiring roughly $5 million in funding to Preston's firm and was rejected. Find him. Consider it done, Victor said, his tone turning entirely professional. Are we looking at a potential acquisition? We are looking at the final piece of Apex's puzzle, I replied. Find him before the day is over. It took Victor less than 4 hours. Dr. Sheldon Vance was sitting in a dingy, dimly lit diner on the outskirts of the industrial district when I found him. He looked nothing like the future titan of industry. He was gaunt, with dark circles bruising the skin under his eyes, his knuckles white as he clutched a cooling cup of black coffee. A stack of dog-eared schematics sat ignored on the table. I slid into the booth across from him. He blinked, pulled from his spiraling thoughts. Booths taken. By me, I said. I placed a sleek, black folder on the table. Dr. Vance. My name is Sloan. I am the primary shareholder of Apex Innovations, and I understand you had a rather unpleasant encounter with Preston Vanguard recently. Sheldon's jaw tightened. A flash of bitter humiliation crossed his tired eyes. If you're from Vanguard, you can go to hell. He already made his point. He dragged me into his office, let me pitch for 2 hours, and then told me my life's work was a cute science fair project not worth the dirt on his shoes. I am not from Vanguard. I severed ties with Preston 3 days ago, I said calmly. I am here because Preston is a fool whose arrogance blinds him to real value. You need $5 million to complete the prototyping of your solid-state microbattery framework. Sheldon froze. How do you know what I'm working on? I know that Apex Innovations is currently building the world's most advanced autonomous drone matrix, and our primary bottleneck is battery weight and heat displacement, I stated, tapping the folder. Your theoretical framework solves both. But you are out of grants, your university is threatening to absorb your patents, and traditional VC firms won't look at you without a working prototype. Sheldon swallowed hard, his defensive posture crumbling into pure, exhausted desperation. Do you have the $5 million? I don't, I said truthfully. He let out a hollow laugh and moved to grab his blueprints. Right. Another waste of my time. I don't have $5 million in liquid cash because I just injected $15 million into Apex, I continued smoothly, placing my hand flat over the blueprints to stop him. But what I do have is equity, infrastructure, and a CEO who trusts my vision. If you sign with Apex today, we will absorb your research into our R&D division. You won't just get $5 million. You'll get a state-of-the-art lab, an engineering team, and 10% equity in the subsidiary company we will form specifically for your patent. Sheldon stared at me, his breath hitching. You would build a subsidiary around my patent? I will build an empire around it, I corrected him, holding his gaze. Preston wanted you to beg for scraps. I want you to work. I want you to build the tech that will make Vanguard Corp look like a relic of the past. Do we have a deal? For a long moment, the diner was entirely silent save for the hum of a broken neon sign. Then, Sheldon reached across the table. Where do I sign? 2 years later, the scent of espresso and expensive leather filled the boardroom of my penthouse office. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the downtown skyline stretched out like a glittering chessboard. I stood by the glass, adjusting the cuff of my tailored blazer. I was no longer the desperate, exhausted girl who had died on a rainy highway clutching a cheap watch meant for a brother who despised her. I was 23 and I was lethal. Quarterly reports, Victor announced, striding into the office with a sleek tablet. He looked sharper, older, carrying the undeniable aura of a billionaire CEO. Apex drone models 4 and 5 have cornered 70% of the global automated logistics market. But the real star is Vance Energy. I turned, taking my seat at the head of the heavy mahogany table. How did the solid-state battery launch go? Victor grinned, a predatory flash of teeth. Market dominance in less than a week. We hold the exclusive patents. Every major tech manufacturer on the globe is scrambling to secure licensing rights from us. The valuation of Vance Energy alone just crossed the $10 billion mark. As the 60% stakeholder of the subsidiary, your personal net worth has effectively become unquantifiable. And Vanguard Corp? I asked, my voice flat. Victor's smile widened. Bleeding out. Preston Vanguard heavily invested in traditional lithium-ion architecture just 6 months ago, expecting a slow market transition. Our launch rendered his entire supply chain obsolete overnight. Vanguard Corp stock has plummeted 30% in 3 days. And to make matters worse, his sister, Lisa, I supplied, feeling absolutely nothing at the mention of her name. Yes. Lisa Vanguard convinced Preston's board to back a biotech startup she discovered. It turned out to be a massive Ponzi scheme. They lost nearly $80 million. The board is furious. Vanguard Corp is officially facing a liquidity crisis. I tapped my pen against the desk. The dominoes I had meticulously arranged over the past 24 months were finally falling. They need a lifeline, I murmured. Exactly, Victor said. Which is why Preston Vanguard has been frantically trying to secure a meeting with the shadow majority shareholder of Vance Energy. He wants to negotiate an exclusive licensing deal to save his company's sinking stock. He has no idea it's you. I looked down at the gold pen in my hand. In my past life, I would have burned myself alive to save Preston from a crisis like this. I would have bled myself dry to protect the family. Set the meeting, I said, looking up. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Let him come to Apex headquarters. The Apex headquarters was a towering monolith of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the old money aesthetic of the Vanguard mansion. I sat at the head of the expansive executive conference table, entirely cast in the shadows of the morning glare filtering through the smart glass. Victor stood to my right, Sheldon, now looking healthy, sharp, and impeccably dressed, sat to my left. At exactly 10 a.m., the heavy double doors swung open. Preston walked in. The past 2 years had not been kind to him. The impeccable, detached nobleman I remembered was gone. He looked exhausted, the lines around his mouth tight with stress, his usually immaculate suit looking somehow heavy on his shoulders. Trailing right behind him was Lisa. She looked nervous, clinging to her designer handbag like a shield, likely brought along to play the charming socialite card to soften the negotiation. Mr. Vanguard, Victor said smoothly, gesturing to the empty seats across the vast table. Welcome to Apex. Preston offered a tight, practiced smile. Victor, it's a pleasure. And Dr. Vance. Preston's eyes flicked to Sheldon, a brief flash of deep regret crossing his features. He remembered the man he had tossed out like garbage. Congratulations on your unprecedented success. Thank you, Preston, Sheldon said, his tone entirely devoid of warmth. I owe it all to an investor who actually knew how to recognize value. Preston swallowed his pride. He took a seat, Lisa sitting beside him. Let's dispense with the pleasantries. Vanguard Corp is prepared to offer highly lucrative distribution channels in exchange for exclusive secondary rights to your solid-state batteries. I brought the initial term sheets. We are willing to pay above market. Vanguard Corp doesn't have the capital to pay above market, I spoke. My voice cut through the room like a blade of ice. Preston froze. Lisa's head snapped up. I leaned forward, stepping out of the glare of the window and into the harsh overhead light of the boardroom. I watched the realization hit them. It was a physical thing, a brutal, violent shockwave that seemed to suck the oxygen entirely out of Preston's lungs. Sloan, Lisa gasped, her voice shrill, cracking with disbelief. She looked around the room, frantic. What are you doing here? Did you get a job as a secretary here? Bring us coffee and get out. Victor let out a cold, sharp laugh. Secretary? Miss Vanguard, You are speaking to the founder of Vance Energy, the primary shareholder of Apex Innovations, and the sole owner of the patents you came here to beg for." Preston's face drained of all color. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and was waiting for the ground to hit him. His eyes darted from me, to Victor, to Sheldon, and back to me. "Sloan." Preston breathed, his voice trembling in a way I had never heard in 2 lifetimes. You're the shadow investor? The 15 million went directly into Apex," I confirmed, my voice smooth, detached, and utterly unbothered. "Which I then leveraged to pull Dr. Vance from the gutter you threw him in. Every single failure your company has experienced in the last week was orchestrated by the very capital you paid me to disappear." Lisa jumped to her feet, her face twisted in ugly, desperate denial. "You're lying. You're an uneducated factory rat. You don't know the first thing about finance." "Preston, she's lying." "Sit down, Lisa," Preston hissed, his voice shaking. He didn't look at her. His eyes were locked onto mine, filled with a swirling vortex of shock, humiliation, and a terrifying realization of his own ruin. "This is a joke," Lisa babbled, unable to process the shifting reality. "Preston, tell them. Tell her to give us the patent. She owes us. She's your sister." I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of an executioner. I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a pristine, laminated sheet of paper, and slid it across the long mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Preston. He looked down at it. It was the voluntary family severance agreement. My signature, Sloan, was inked neatly at the bottom. "I am no one's sister," I said quietly. The silence in the room was absolute. "You purchased your peace of mind for $15 million, Preston. You bought Lisa's comfort. You explicitly demanded that I never step foot in your family's life again. I am simply honoring the contract." "Sloan." Preston choked out. The cold, detached brother was gone. In his place was a broken man staring at the ghost of the girl he had discarded. "Sloan, please. The company, our grandfather built Vanguard. If we don't get this tech, the board will oust me. Lisa's bad investments have left us in billions of debt. I will lose everything." "You already lost everything, Preston," I replied coldly. "You just didn't realize it until today." He stared at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears of pure desperation. For the first time he saw me, he didn't see a nuisance. He didn't see a fake, grasping poor relative. He saw an immovable force that had outplayed him at every single turn. "I'll give you shares," Preston begged, his pride entirely shattered. He reached across the table, his hands shaking. "I'll make you a board member of Vanguard. You can come home. Your room is still there. We can be a family." "Security," I said, my voice echoing loudly in the quiet room. The heavy doors opened instantly. 4 large men in dark suits stepped inside. "Miss Sloan?" the head of security asked. "Mr. Vanguard and his guest were just leaving," I said, standing up and buttoning my blazer. I didn't look at them anymore. They were no longer of interest to me. They were bad debt. "Sloan, you can't do this." "I'm your brother," Preston shouted as the guards placed heavy hands on his shoulders, pulling him back. "Sloan." Lisa was sobbing now, shrieking something about it not being fair, but the heavy glass doors sealed shut, cutting off their pathetic noises completely. Victor let out a long breath, adjusting his tie. "Well, that was remarkably efficient. Should we expect Vanguard Corp to file for bankruptcy by the end of the month?" "By the end of the week," Sheldon corrected, looking thoroughly satisfied. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the streets below. A few moments later, I saw 2 tiny figures emerge from the lobby. Preston and Lisa. They stood on the sidewalk, looking entirely lost, the empire they thought they ruled crumbling into dust around them. In my past life, I had died in the rain, crying over a family that never loved me. In this life, I stood at the pinnacle of the world, protected by the only armor that never betrayed its wearer. The $15 million Preston had thrown at me like trash had forged an empire, and the severance contract had set me free. I picked up my coffee, the warm porcelain soothing against my skin. "Victor," I called out, not turning away from the magnificent view of my city. "Yes, Miss Sloan?" "Draft the acquisition papers for Vanguard Corp's physical assets," I said, taking a slow, peaceful sip. "Buy them out for pennies on the dollar. I want to turn their ancestral mansion into our new drone testing facility." "With pleasure." I smiled, finally feeling the last invisible chain of my past snap and fade into nothing. The air up here was clean, the future was mine, and the transaction was officially complete.